And with the 2-month-long future state event, we were allowed to glimpse into some of those possible futures. We were able to look both near and far to see what the future could be for the DC universe. But the question remains, which of those futures is the present, if you will? Which of those futures is going to be the reality for these characters that we've seen? Regie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to spend some time talking about DC Future State and specifically what comes next. And I want to do this video because I've been talking about Future State off and on for months. And ever since the beginning, people have basically been saying, what comes next? And I think people feel that way because of all of the reboots and stutter steps that DC has had over the years where they've hit the reset button. And I think folks are basically saying, okay, this looks like something that we've seen before, so let's just skip to the end and tell me what is going to be sticking, what's going to be changing, who's going to be killed off, and who's going to continue into the future. But as we get deeper into February, we are starting to get some answers to some of these questions. We are starting to get a clearer picture of what next actually looks like. From the top, I want to say that the demise of DC Comics appears to be nothing more than clickbait. And I say that in this video because so many videos have been created about the future state, not about the characters and the timelines and the continuity, but so many videos about the fact that future state is the winding down of DC Comics. People are saying that DC Comics is going to be defunct come the summer. And I don't believe that that is the case. There are a handful of people out there that are making a lot of noise, connecting a lot of dots, basically saying DC is going away. I don't think that that is going to happen. What I do hope has happened is that DC has spent the last quarter, if you will, figuring out what the future looks like, not just for these characters, but also for the company as a whole. My hope is that they have been working to put their house in order now that they are on the other side of all of the layoffs that have actually happened, all of the restructuring, all of the shuffling of personnel and people and services. Now that that stuff is behind them, my hope is that they actually have a game plan for the future. That is my hope, because I think that DC is doing some really cool stuff and I can't wait to see what happens next. So with Dark Knight Death Metal, we were exposed to the multiverse's darkest threats, right? We saw the worst of the worst play out in Dark Knight's Death Metal. And this was basically where Scott Snyder was wrapping up the New 52 DC Rebirth continuity that started in 2011. He is basically putting a bow on that continuity, and that again is what is leading people to basically say, what's next? What is the next thing? What does the future actually look like? And with the 2-month-long future state event, we were allowed to glimpse into some of those possible futures. We were able to look both near and far to see what the future could be for the DC universe. But the question remains, which of those futures is the present, if you will? Which of those futures is going to be the reality for these characters that we've seen? And again, we're starting to get some of those answers. And as Future State wraps up this month, the question really becomes, what does the future hold? And more importantly, which of the Future State characters will remain? Because there have been a lot of them that have been introduced. So which versions will remain? These are really great questions. And if you recall from my previous video, Dark Knight's death metal was supposed to segue into something called 5G, or 5 generations. 5G was DC co-publisher Dan Didorio's plan to clean up DC's timeline and continuity issues. This thing was supposed to clean the slate and give them a clear path forward. But with Dan's departure, there was a pivot. And 5G was supposedly killed off, even though huge parts of it were actually integrated into the future state. And if you read some of the interviews that he did prior to his departure, if you read some of the press releases that actually came out about 5G, you can definitely see some of those very same thoughts and story arcs and concepts integrated into future state. But again, which version of the future will we actually see? We get on March 2nd, we get an answer to that question, and it comes in the form of a 64-page one-shot called Infinite Frontier Issue 0. Infinite Frontier Issue 0 is the book that DC says is going to set the stage for the future. In this book, it is going to tee up new storylines, surprises, and mysteries that are going to unfold supposedly for months and possibly for years to come. Along with this one shot, DC is actually restarting a host of titles. So this next part is, I think, a really important part because it counters what we have been hearing from those people that have been talking about the demise of DC Comics. They have pointed out that with Future State, that basically resulted in the ending of many titles. And they have basically said those titles are never coming back. And I don't know if that is true. I really don't know if that is true. But what I will say is that it seems really interesting that DC is announcing that they are going to be starting 19 ongoing series and 6 limited series starting in March, with more in April and in May. So again, if DC is shutting down this summer, the fact that they are launching all of these titles just does not make sense. It really doesn't. And a lot of the creators that are going to be working on these titles are some of the creators that were leading the efforts in Q4 of 2020. So again, I'm trying to provide some additional things for people to consider as they, hear about all of these other things that are out there. There is oftentimes an additional part of the story to be told, and that's part of the reason why I'm including some of these data points in this video. With these aforementioned titles, we are actually going to see the return of several fan favorite characters, as well as the continuation of several future state characters, including Tim Fox, the next Batman, John Kent, Yara Flor, the new Flash, and also Red X, just to name a few. And we already know that Tim Fox is the next Batman. We've seen that in the Future State story arc. But what we don't know is how it is that he became the next Batman. We are going to get that answer. And it's going to come in the form of a book called Second Son that is set to be released digitally February 23rd, and it will be in print April 6th. We also know that Yara Flor will receive her own solo title starting in May. The new Mr. Miracle will have his origin story told in Mr. Miracle, The Source of Freedom in May. And it appears that Red X will be roaming the halls in the new Teen Titans Academy title set to be released in March. Now, I will tell you that the solicitations for the new Teen Titans Academy sounds a lot like the Strange Academy that was released by Marvel, but we will save that topic for a different day. So I have actually read a healthy number of the Future State titles that have been released. And if you haven't yet read these titles, I highly encourage you to check them out because they are really good. And I think that Future State served an important role because it allowed people like me who had an interest in DC to basically jump on board with some of these old time characters and also some new characters and feel like I could have a fresh start. I could get on board. I can go for the journey. And so I think again that Future State served an important role. And I think that that role will be amplified as long as DC continues to build upon what was done in Future State. As long as they don't leave a lot of those pieces behind, I think it will serve them well into the future. And based upon what we are seeing, it seems like they're going to pull through a lot of those threads that were set up in the 2-month Future State. And honestly, I cannot wait to see what it is that DC releases in the months ahead. With that said, I am going to wrap this video up. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I definitely want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of the content that gets released from my channel. And if you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.